Joe Peiffer's experience with his own family prepared him for the conversations that he now has with a growing number of other farm families. Joe grew up on a farm in Delaware County, Iowa, but the financial pressures of the farm crisis weighed down his parents back then. For the past 4 decades, Joe has used what he learned from watching his parents to help counsel other farm families experiencing farm finance distress. Hi, I'm Dave Price. Joe is a bankruptcy attorney, and he's the founding attorney and president of Ag and Business Legal Strategies in Hiawatha, Iowa. His firm got an early warning in the late summer about the depths of difficulties for farmers, and he fears that much more is ahead. During our conversation, he will share with what has gone wrong with some of the lives of his clients and what other things people can do to try to prevent a similar situation. We're going to start by getting to know Joe. All right, let's start off with a little bit about your background. I'm going to put you on the spot right away and praise you for being slim and trim in 2025. Seems like you deserve public props for that, right?
Thank you. A long ways down and a long ways to go.
That's no easy task. So congratulations. You got a New Year's resolution off going. Was that a resolution or not?
Pretty much.
Outstanding. Talk a little bit about more of your background. Why do you do what you do?
Well, I go back to the 1980s and I saw my father and many others with him get whipsawed out in the farm crisis of the 80s. And the late 70s, my father and mother were paper millionaires. And they built a hog house and a grain bin. We're buying feeder pigs, and they got whipsawed out in the roller coaster markets. And in 1987, they sold the last 47 acres of their farm for less money than they paid to put the hog house and grain bin up.
Oh.
And part of my passion is to help people avoid what they went through. They avoided bankruptcy, but they walked out at age 60 with basically the shirt in their back, furniture in their house, and a dumpy old car. They bought a house, and Dad started selling life and health insurance at age 60. He'd never done anything but farm. He'd been on that farm for 51 years, from the age 9 till age 60. He had to start over. I try to help people make rational decisions about the problems they're having financially so that they can get ahead of the boat instead of, they have to make decisions. It's important that you make decisions and that you don't bury your head in the sand. I see a lot of farmers today that have buried their head in the sand too long. And so something to think about is indecision is a decision to let others decide for you. So many people just, what can I do? What can I do? And they do nothing. And as you do nothing, you end up having interest accrue. And if you're going to borrow money and pledging your land as collateral to pay off last year's operating loan, now you're going to have more interest costs next year. You've got to figure out a way to get this stuff, the bills paid as you go. Otherwise, you might do it once, you might do it twice, but as you do that, it's like rolling a snowball up a hill. At some point, gravity will win and the snowball will roll down over you. That's what the interest does if you can't pay your bills as you go.
You were a young guy when your folks went through that. What was that like to watch?
It sucked. When they sold the last of the farm on April 1st, 1987, I'd just gotten married. And like many a farm boy, you'd like to have the family farm stay in the family. I'd just gotten married, just started my own law firm. There was no way anybody would loan me a dime to buy a house, let alone buy the farm. So it got sold. I drive 20 miles to avoid driving by the old farm. And did that for about 5 years until I finally came to the reckoning. Dad and Mom were happy. They moved on, and I needed to move on too.
Where was the farm?
In Delaware County, about 35 miles straight west of Dubuque on Highway 20. And if I drive by it today, none of the buildings that were there when I was raised are there. There are two trees, one my father planted in the 50s and one that I planted in the 70s that are still there. That's it. It's a beautiful grain setup there. I know the man that owns it. He's doing a great job with it.
Can you compare? One of the things you point out are the differences in land prices then and now. It's great to have somebody on, great perhaps in the right word here, because I'm sorry your family went through the farm crisis of the 80s, but you do have, unfortunately, the perspective of what that's like to go through. Can you compare maybe the differences in the conditions of the 80s and now?
Yes. You go back in the 80s, and when things started getting bad, the banks pulled the plug quickly. And we ended up having farm credit. Many banks just say, hey, you're not making it. And they force a lot of people to sell out quickly. As they went to sell out quickly, we ended up with a flood of land on the market. There hadn't been the number of good years in a row that we had here that have helped the land prices go up. Top land in Iowa at that time would have been $4,500 an acre.
Mm-hmm.
At the depths of the farm crisis in about 1987, you could buy the best farm ground around for $1,000, maybe $1,200 an acre. Now, today we've got top land still selling over $20,000 an acre. In 1987, I could put a person in a Chapter 12 bankruptcy. And while they were in that bankruptcy, I could come out 100% leverage, meaning that every dime that farm was worth could be owed to the bank. And I could put together a cash flow that would pay for that farm. And you'd be farming 300 acres. You could feed your family and pay for the farm with 7.5% to 8% interest. And it would pencil out that it would pay for itself in 30 years. Today, looking at land that's selling over $20,000 an acre, there's none of that will pay for itself with what you can raise on it that's a legal crop. You can't come out and pay for it. Now, if you can't pay for it, that means that when the farmer comes to me and they've been losing money on their grain crops or losing money on their livestock operation, and they want to say, well, what can I do? I can't reorganize that business around saving the family farm as it was, because you can't come out and be 100% leveraged. You look at loan to values, and the commercial lenders are dropping in saying, well, we'll do 75% of a benchmark, for example. And what does Farm Credit set of benchmarks? They just dropped a bunch of benchmarks yesterday. And where they have been looking at benchmarks at 11 or 12,000 an acre, they dropped them to about $8,000 an acre. And 75% of 8,000 is less than 75% of 12,000. So instead of they'd loan 6,000, where they would have loaned 9,000 before on it. But in a bankruptcy, if you've got equity, that has to go to the unsecured creditors. That might be the people that finance crops that you couldn't pay back. Well, I've got a situation right now where a family farmer has a farm that's been in the family for over 60 years. And it's worth maybe $1 million. They owe 600,000 or thereabouts.
Mm.
As a condition of getting a Chapter 12 plan confirmed, if they want to keep that farm, they've got to pay that equity out over 5 years.
Oof.
That's not much time to pay out $400,000,
Mm-hmm.
especially when you're losing money on the crops you're producing. So reluctantly, that farmer is making the decision that grinds her up inside, and they have to sell the family farm. She's been trying to get family members to buy in so it can become a century farm in another 39 years. Well, family members don't want to be that stretched out. So it's going to go to a third party probably. So that's a big difference in it, is we haven't seen the drop in the land prices. Now in the mid-quality land, CSRs, let's call it 50 to 70, we're starting to see drops in that land price. In the high quality land, 85 and above, hasn't dropped significantly at all.
Mm-hmm. How do you, as you're counseling these folks, because of what your family went through years ago, you know the emotional side of this, and I assume that's something that you're never going to forget, what it was like for your folks to go through this. How do you can't have these folks put their emotions aside because they're too deep, but in some ways you sort of have to, right? As you're trying to be clear-eyed about what the best plan forward is. How do you help them deal with, like in this case you're talking about, if this has been in the family for 60 years and she has to make the decision how to survive going forward, and that could mean selling. How do you set those emotions aside to try to make the best decision? How do you help people get through that?
One of the things that we do is we talk about the pressure you're under now. And what would it be like if you didn't have the financial pressure where it doesn't matter how hard you work, you're backing up. We spend time talking about that. We also spend time talking about what do they desire? Now, she desires to have it become a century farm, but that's not a realistic desire. And so we spent time and said, do you want to keep part of something, the house where you're living, or do you want to lose it all? Because when she came to me, there'd already been a foreclosure filed. The bank was foreclosing on the farm, not the century farm, the would-be century farm, but the bank is foreclosing on the farm where she lives. So now with the bank foreclosing on the farm where she lives, we filed a bankruptcy that stopped that. And then we've been trying to put together a plan that will allow her to keep something. If she does nothing, the case will be dismissed. The bank that has a loan on the would-be or wannabe century farm will foreclose. The bank that has a loan on the farm where her house is will foreclose, complete its foreclosure. Both farms will be sold to third parties, and she'll be out in left field with no land, no machinery, and a huge tax bill. So her options are stark. Continue to delay and do nothing, and the court will have to dismiss her case, or move forward and make a gut-wrenching decision so she can save something. Now, she and her husband are in their early 60s, and to be faced with coming out with debt up to the full value of the farm where they're living. And thankfully, it's a small farm, so they can cash flow it, and she has an off-farm job. But she doesn't make enough off the farm to keep the farm that she wants as a century farm. So you have to spend time with them. You have to give them time to process. And then you have to remember that what part of the brain's thinking. The rational part of the brain says, okay, sell it and move on. But then you've got the fight or flight part, the amygdala of the brain that just says, my back's against the wall, but doggone it, I'm going to do it. And you've got to get the rational part of the brain to be doing the thinking. And you've still got to process time and help them realize that they need to, you got to give them some time, but then you have to get them moving on it. Because if you don't get them moving, nothing good will happen. Again, indecision's a decision to let others decide for you.
And that's a balance there, right? Because you know the legal side of it, so you know the calendar that's ticking, the clock that's ticking, but you have to be cognizant of this process. So she has to come to terms with making a decision that she frankly doesn't want to make.
Correct. I mean, in this case, it's taken us 9 months to get there.
So how dire is this? This is obviously her situation is especially sad, but how widespread? I mean, how much of this are you seeing?
In the last week of August to the first week of September, we signed up 5 new farm clients. Most of them are crop farmers. Bankruptcy attorneys don't see crop farmers generally from before they go to the field planting in the spring until after they're out in the fall. They don't want to talk to us. The banks, everything's fine. The bank wants them to raise the crop. And once the crop is raised, they're going to, the bank will hope they harvest and then pay all the money over to the bank. And then they'll tell them, we won't finance you next year. To have 5 come in 2 weeks, all of them from Western Iowa to Western Illinois to Eastern Illinois. And in every case, they're in dire situations where one of them has some equity, another one is upside down, 2 to 1. Assets worth a little over 7 million, liabilities north of 16 million.
Oof.
That's one of the worst I've seen, and this is my 44th year, and I've not seen one that bad before. And those are tough situations.
In these cases, were these folks who were kind of hoping against hope that something was going to work out, and ideally they needed to start this process earlier, or had their circumstances changed where it just got to where they had to take action now?
Well, in one of the situations, a gentleman had put together had a nice grain elevator and was doing some transloading, but he hadn't really pushed the transloading. And now it looks like he's going to be pushing the transloading, which may be his ticket out. In another one, the person had no financial acumen whatsoever. So if you wanted something, you go to the equipment dealer and they'd finance it, or the bank could finance it. And nobody was stopping and making him look at the cash flow. Will this operation cash flow? And then when COVID came along, we got these EIDL loans, economic injury disaster loans. Well, that was almost like free money. You pay it off 3.75% interest, pay it over 30 or 40-year amortization. Well, that's all fine and dandy, except you got to pay it back. And so if you're not watching what you're doing with the money and it goes out the back door, you still got to pay it back. So that's a problem. Then I'm seeing others that are out there, and in most instances, they'd stuck their head in the sand for a long time and had ignored the signs that were out there. Many farmers don't like to deal with cash flows. They don't like to deal with balance sheets. My father hated doing his balance sheet to get money from PCA. So why won't they let me put the value of the farm that it is today, not the value I paid for it, and keep the land at cost basis? And then they want to decrease the machinery 10% each year. Well, my brother, who when he died in 2007, was the vice president of underwriting at Farmer Mac in Washington, D.C., and he had gone through the farm crisis on the flip side of things from me, taught me, he said, we've got to look and see what is earned net worth. Do you have earned net worth? The only way you're going to figure out if you got earned net worth is to keep things the same. Keep the land in at what you paid for it, depreciate the equipment some, add to it, and then we'll look at it and say, what did the balance sheet say at the end of year one? Now where are we at year 2, year 3, year 4? And now we can see what the equity is, and that will tell us what is our earned net worth. Now, if it goes down, you had a loss, and that tells us the business didn't make it. But if we go in and put in just what the appraised value is, now we've got inflation talking, and that has nothing to do with is the business healthy.
If you had, so you're dealing with this kind of unprecedented August and September inquiries, I presume this is, as we talk, we're talking in December. This is when you would generally start hearing from these folks, right?
Correct. We would start hearing generally mid-November to December or right after the first of the year, when they hopefully have closed out their books and figured out how poor it is.
So do you have folks that are waiting right now to see what the Trump administration is going to do for financial assistance? And is that enough to determine whether they can hang on for another year?
Many are out there waiting for that to see what's there. We just had the Supplemental Disaster Relief Program Phase 2 come out, and applications just are starting. And then we're talking about Trump has talked about doing something because of the tariffs and how that has impacted us. And we've got a lot of people saying, well, what's that going to be? The unfortunate thing is to realize that any bailout is a Band-Aid. And in many instances, we need major surgery. Unfortunately, the Trump administration with its tariffs has basically gutted 30 or 40 years of solid marketing that the farmers have done. And through the trade organizations, the Corn Association, the soybean pork producers, anybody around, they've done a lot of trade negotiations, gone on trade seminars all over, or trade missions all over the world. Most of that's been gutted because of these tariffs and the fact that nothing's stable. You turn around, and every time you turn around, the rules are changing yet again. The unpredictability makes us an unreliable supplier in the eyes of the world. And as we're an unreliable supplier, look at what's happened. Until recently, China hadn't bought 1 bushel of beans since the tariffs on their Chinese stuff started coming in. He put the tariffs on, they did reciprocal tariffs. And they said, well, we'll go other places. So where'd they go? Brazil, Argentina. Once you lose that market, how do you get back the confidence of the buyers in China or other parts of the world to say America's a reliable supplier of corn, soybeans, pork, beef, chicken, whatever it is? And the answer is, they're not going to trust us at this point. That means that we're in with a situation where we have oversupply. Now, when you're looking at number 2 corn or soybeans, those are commodities. There's never a lot of profit in those. There might be bumps when you got $7 corn and $15 or $16 beans, but it doesn't stay there very long. And now with an oversupply, unless we can figure out a way to get new markets, and there aren't that many people in the rest of the world to pick up the slack that China's no longer taking from us. So now we got oversupply. Back in the 70s, early 70s, 60s, 70s, we had the diverted acres where we would take land out of production, so that would cut the amount of corn or soybeans or oats or whatever you were producing, and that would then hopefully raise the price. But once you go to a global market, all that means is that somebody else will fill the void. So your prices, leaving tariffs aside, pretty much are stable across the world. So it's a deep situation, and any of these dollars that they're talking about here are not going to come quickly. And when they do come, they might let you stay another year, but they're not going to be the answer to the problem. If you're not making money doing what you're doing, why are you doing it?
The one thing that I have struggled to try to figure out, because I've heard this laid out similarly by others, and that once you lose some of these overseas buyers, and especially for corn and beans that are so prevalent in the Midwest as we produce so much of them here, it's so difficult to try to game plan how can we make up for losing China? Where can that go? And it doesn't seem like there's any way realistically to increase our domestic consumption of either of these two products, even if we go crazy on the fuel side. So where's the optimism here? Is the only way around this is we're going to have a lot of these folks get out of corn and beans?
I think we're going to have to figure out, can we do something else? I mean, we don't eat number two corn. Uh, we haven't got an appetite for enough tofu to take care of the extra soybeans.
Yeah.
So what are the other products that can be there? But remember, the infrastructure that we have built over the last 50 years is designed for corn and beans. Exactly. And we can transport them in containers, we can transport them in rail cars, we can transport them in barges, in ships. But now when we get to a specialty crop, there may be a higher margin on it, but you've got to find a market. A number of years ago, there were some farmers in around Webster City had put together a factory that was actually raising fish, tilapia and things.
Tilapia.
They took that in what would have been the old vacuum cleaner plant in Webster City, and they had lots of places where they're growing fish, and they had lots of tanks, and they had the technology down to raise the fish. Problem was, they didn't have enough market for all the fish. So when I took that company through a bankruptcy, on day one, we announced to the court, we haven't got a market for these fish. We're going to have to euthanize 5 million fish.
Holy cow.
Which ultimately we did, and sold the company to somebody else and moved on. But we're going to lose a lot of producers because they won't be able to hold on because of their debt structure and other things. And so, can they find another, is there another product that they can raise? If we can find another product they can raise, then we can go ahead and do something.
How many folks do you fear are going to leave and have to get out?
Well, we've got a couple of factors here. One's going to be the age out, because you look at the average age of landowners, and it's over 60, as I recall now. Mm-hmm. And so then that means we got people in their 70s and 80s, and I have clients in their 70s and 80s that are in trouble. So some are going to go by the wayside simply because they're going to die, but the others are going to go out because their finances are such they can't continue making the payments that need to be made. I won't be surprised to see a quarter to a third go within the next 3 to 5 years. That is a stark reality when you talk about a quarter to a third in maybe 3 to 5 years. I've heard people say a quarter in 2. I've heard people say a third in 3. We're going to see a massive shakeup. So
are our hopes for the federal government to solve this? Is this solved? Where's the optimism here? Like, is there anything that's going to stop this? And I guess the reason I ask is Congress is not known for you talked about the indecision and decision making and all that kind of things. Congress frequently is paralyzed by inaction.
Yeah.
So where's the hope here?
Well, they say the opposite of pro is con, right?
Right.
Therefore, the opposite of progress must be Congress.
Exactly.
I don't see Congress doing anything until they get enough people telling them we've got to do something. That happened in the 80s, because when the farm crisis got rolling and there were farmers losing their farms right and left, Senator Grassley and others put together Chapter 12.
Mm-hmm.
So there are going to be a lot of people are going to get stuck having to sell out. They're going to need to use Chapter 12 because with the prices of land, they may have bought the land, let's say, at $5,000 an acre, but now it'll fetch maybe 15. Well, that's $10,000 an acre capital gains.
Yeah.
Well, Chapter 12 has a provision that allows them to avoid those taxes. Otherwise, they're stuck going out of business. The bank gets the money and they get the tax bill. Sort of reminds me of the old country western song, "She got the gold mine, I got the shaft."
I got the shaft.
So as far as hope, right now, I'm not seeing a lot of hope. We've got to shake it out and get to people that have the stability to do it. Now, will that mean that we're going to end up with more corporate farms? And I'm talking big corporate farms, not the farmer corporations where, a farmer is farming 3,000 or 5,000 acres. We might get much bigger control in there. And those are people that may set this up in a fashion that we could see our food prices go up. At some point, they're not going to produce if they're not making money. That's their goal. That should be the goal of the farmer, is to produce in a way that they're making money.
Well, it is a challenging situation for sure. I really appreciate you walking through all of this. This is a tough situation for a lot of folks, and I know that you're having some challenging but necessary conversations with these people.
Yes. Thank you for the opportunity to share with your audience.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. And one non-ag thing, Joe is a little unique in the state of Iowa in that he earned one college degree at Iowa State University, and then he earned his law degree at Iowa State's rival, the University of Iowa. Now, you can learn more about Joe and what his firm does by checking out our profile piece about him. You can find that in the American Farmland Owner Weekly Newsletter. It's free. It comes out every Friday afternoon, and it's the place where landowners get their news. See it now at AmericanFarmlandowner.com. Thanks for hanging out with us on the podcast, and thanks for caring about the future of our farm.